You know, sometimes you just gotta fix things yourself. Especially when Games Workshop don't build the miniature you're after. So if they don't make it, maybe I should. I mean, I have a lot of grey unpainted plastic lying around, and I probably won't paint that anytime soon. So I'll do the next best thing. Kitbash for the miniatures I have, and make the one I want. The one with wings. It also gives me a good excuse to make use of this Dominion box that we all bought and didn't really do anything with. The Dominion box had a lot of good scores, and it also had a few bad ones too. I mean, Hobgrots anyone? But these steps fall into the cool pile. Let's use it. Albeit with a few modifications, mainly removing the cape and leg that are moulded onto it. And of course adding some stones and dirt from the garden just to blend all that in with the base. They say never use good paints for scenery. The problem is, I don't really have any bad ones. So the next best thing is to use a paint that I don't really touch anymore. You know that ones that sit on your shelf collecting dust, but do make your collection look good. In my case, it's mainly a stack of Vallejo paints. I bought these ages ago. It's an old military colour set, which seems to be made up of a million different shades of green and brown. I'm sure these make a lot of sense to scale modelers. And onto the paint job. It's an organic scene with a tree embedded into the stonework, so I want all the colours to blend together. Blend, you say? That means wet blending. So you know the deal here. Keep it wet, move it around, and if you're lucky, you'll come out of this with your dignity intact. That's also a good life lesson, by the way. All the paints will blend together, and when dry, looks pretty cool. Trust me. I'm using these washed out tones, so I really want the Space Marine to stand out against this base. One final touch is to go back around the whole thing and stab out any air bubbles. Don't let these dry, guys. So, how the hell do you paint wings? Let's find out. Now, I'm not a complete psycho. I don't want to go around the whole thing, paint individual wings, and then layer them out, and then a final edge highlight to finish. Sure, it will look good, but there must be an easier way. I mean, that's what contrast paints are made for, right? So, like the steps, or with a brighter colour, I'm going to wet blend a contrast purple and blue together. I'm sure this will work. 6 months later, when all that's dry, I can then spend 20 minutes or so and sketch out a few feather patterns on some of these wings. With the front done, repeat the whole process on the inside. You need to be careful with the contrast. I'm slapping it on here and it's pooling up. So with a dry brush it's good to go back in and wick away any of the excess. For a bit of definition, I'll go back in and add a quick wash between each feather. Ah yes, Verdigris, my favourite stripper, and also some weird effect paint from good old Duncan Rhodes paints. Let's give it a bash. Once Verdigris is dry, the paint that is, not the stripper, it's time for a silver dry brush. That's right, these wings are made of metal. Look out, it's the base. Now that all that slop of wet blending is dry, it's time to add a bit of contrast. So we can crack out the washes. This green wash from Games Workshop adds a nice mouldy tinge to all the stonework. A slightly darker one on the trees in the recess areas, just to make the dark areas, well, dark. For the hanging vine, I want this to stand out a little more than the rest, so we'll go back to the base coat of white. While we're at it, this creature can also get a bit of white. Then we'll give the whole thing a wash with the green we used on the stones, easy as pie. Okay, mix a few greys together on your palette, or some black and white. We'll then do a bit of wet blending, albeit a little bit different from what we've done on the base. Keep the paint wet here and start with a dark colour. And slowly work your way up using the lighter shades, with the lightest being at the top of the skull. We'll then just repeat this process on the second one. I don't know what this creature is, but let's make him stand out with a few contrast greens. Let the paint do the work here. I know Games Workshop get a lot of grief for adding too much detail on the miniatures, and in some cases I think that's true, but you don't have to paint it all. I mean, I could have cut a lot of these details off. The vines, for instance, I could have pretty much cut all them off. We're nearly there at the base now, so let's give the whole thing a big dirty dry brush with a big flat brush. As always, less is more, so take your time. I give the whole thing a few small passes, building up the layers each time. It's always easier to add more paint than it is to take it away. If you want, you can start your dry brush with a grey and work your way up to white, just for a little bit more contrast. Well, I can't put it off any longer, let's get this guy painted. After an undercoat of white, and then macragge blue all over the top, we need to darken this up, so it gets a blue wash. Once it's dry, and it can take a while, then pretty much the rest of the paint job can be done with dry brushing. Though not a flat one, more of a round makeup one this time. We'll start with the original macragge blue. Once that's done, we'll move on to a lighter version. In this case, Thousand Suns. Work around the model, picking out the higher areas. Imagine a light being shined down on it from above. Like the steps, add a little bit each time until you're happy with how it looks. For the black bits that join the armour, just drop in a little bit of black contrast paint. Bear with me here, the whole thing gets a very generous silver dry brush. In truth, it's not really dry. As you can see, there's still a lot of silver on the brush. That's intended. But trust the process. See, the gun already looks good. Okay, with the silver dry, we'll go back over it with a Thousand Suns and target these silver areas. Try to avoid the weapons here where possible. It will save you having to redo them. On the home stretch now, get your gold in, retributor gold of course. Be as neat as possible to avoid the ball ache of a big cleanup. Using the side of a brush will really help with these. How to mess up? I mean, do an eye. Drop a bit of white in the space, and if like me you made a mess, tidy it up with a base coat. With the eye drying, we'll go back to the gold and flood it with a flesh coloured wash. The red tint really works well against the gold. Back to the eye. With the white dry and tidied up, flood the area with a contrast paint. Make sure it's a bright one. A few transfers to finish him off. Just use the original base coat to blend these in. And we'll call him done. If you got this far, please do like, subscribe, share, and hey, even leave a comment. All we got to do now is take a look at the final reveal.